Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz. As we continue on our team discussions, I have a very special guest, a good Tiger man from the Supercoach Herald Sun Code Sports team. We have Paton. Welcome, mate.
Thank you, Swizz. Great to be here. Always love talking about the Tigers. Probably a tricky year to try and do it this year, but hopefully we can find some value there in terms of our Supercoach sides.
Yeah, well, it goes both ways because while we're winning flags, we probably weren't the most Supercoach relevant team outside of Dusty, where it's the complete opposite now. We're probably going to see a lot more losses than wins, unfortunately. But from a Supercoach perspective, it actually makes us very relevant. And I think the community is going to get probably sick of us talking about the Mighty Tigers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just looking at some of the names on the screen here, it's a bit of a different world now to back in the triple flag days, but very different looking team. But yeah, hopefully some good prospects for us. Certainly plenty of value. Anyway, there's not a lot at the primo end of the price scale.
Yeah, I've managed to throw a couple in, but probably not as relevant as they may have been in previous years. I'll kick off just with a bit of the fixture. We don't have that dreaded opening round match this year, so we are a lot more relevant. If we'd probably had a bye like we did, round 2, round 3, like 8 of the other teams, I feel like it would have been a little bit harder to probably pick a couple of the Richmond players because they're going to probably miss early on. But yeah, the bye rounds in 0 and 14 are a lot more friendly for the Tigers. Opening 5 games. It's a bit of a tricky schedule for the Tiger Cubs this year. The Blue Baggers are meant to be right up there. Port Adelaide right in the mix of it as well. The Lions, the Premiers,
over there, yeah.
and Fremantle are meant to be could be a top 4 side this year too. So it's not the love that we want to see from the AFL in regards to the fixture. But it probably gives the Cubs the best opportunity to play against some of the best players in the league.
Yeah, and I mean, this is probably not necessarily what we're going to be talking about today, but when you're looking at other teams' fixtures, and I think a factor will be, who plays Richmond twice, who plays them early, and that might help you if you want to select players from some of those other teams that you've got listed there.
Yeah, and that's probably the big thing with the double games, as you said. It's not as much as who we're playing, but yeah, looking at that's a very handy list, especially down the bottom there, Geelong. I'll probably talk a bit more depth about that in their podcast. But they do have 2 games in round 17 and 24 against us. And you'd expect Geelong to be probably fighting for the finals where Richmond's probably going to be in a fight for the spoon. So, yeah, unfortunately for Tiger supporters, it might be on the receiving end of a couple of hidings there, but it's probably good if you're a Geelong supporter or a Supercoach player who has Geelong players. So, yeah, it's good to be mindful of because I think the win tally is going to probably be very low for us this season.
Yeah, that North in round 23 can be interesting. Obviously, they've got a few Supercoach relevant players, and then we've got the added spice of Richmond having North's first draft pick next year. So there'll be a little bit of on the line in that one, which will be fun to watch. But we'll have to wait a little while for that.
Exactly. All right, so I'll go through this best, not the best lineup, but it's a likely round 1 starting lineup. I've had a couple arguments already because I have sort of been in a few Richmond forums and talking about this, and I have taken out Kaczynski after pretty well being lynched in one forum. So I didn't realize it wasn't getting as much love as others. I'm probably a little bit lucky because I do know somebody who does work down at Richmond who is giving me a little bit of inside feedback on how people are going on in the track. So I do appreciate, I'll say, their input because I don't want to give anything away. But so I've got Brody, Ben Miller. There's always a bit of controversy about Ben Miller being there, but his actual win rate and defensive efforts are right up there. So I've got him over Gipkus at the moment just because Gipkus coming back from that injury. I don't see them rushing it in. I don't know how you feel about that, Al, but I'm looking a bit more of a long-term prospect here from the Richmond lineup.
Yeah, and I think John Ralph did a story before Christmas on how some of the Tigers were tracking, and the sort of vibe coming out of there was very much that they're not going to rush these guys. Obviously, even looking at the draft, how many games Richmond wins in 2025 and certainly early in the year is not their primary consideration. They want to get these guys right for, it's probably 3 or 4 years down the track. So I'm sure we'll get to it. I'm jumping ahead to Sam Layla on the bench, and I think they'd probably like to get him out for round 1, the number 1 marquee draft pick. So he's sort of just starting, getting back into full training now. But some of those other guys, I think, we might not see Gibcus till round 2 or 3 or something like that. So, unfortunately, probably not going to be one for us to start the year in Supercoach.
Yeah, well, it's funny you said Layla because I actually didn't have him in, but it's just such a big talking point. So I thought, I've got to put him in there, the bench. But yeah, I agree. I don't actually think he might be there round 1. But yeah, the rest of that back line, Vlossi, Short, Bolter with an asterisk at the moment, unfortunately, for without knowing the full details of what happened up there in the Moala Ski Club. But we'll have to wait and see how that court case plays out. I'm sure it's been a talking point behind the scenes over there at Herald, Sun and Code Sports about, and it's always probably hard for you guys, journos, what you can write and what you can't write in these situations. But not probably the news that Richmond supporters wanted to wake up to the other day.
No, and some of those stories are definitely it's a bit of a battle too between you've got the front of the paper and the back of the paper, and the news guys sort of make the running on those kind of yarns. So as you say, it's probably over in the hands of the lawyers and things now. So we'll just wait and see. I mean, generally, I think the Richmond backline, although they obviously gave up some scores last year, it's fairly solid. With your Broad and Vostone and these kind of types sort of holding it together. But there's obviously all those injuries last year to Tyler Young and Gibcus and these guys. Hopefully, when they come back, the backline actually doesn't look too bad. But Bolton not being there would be a big blow.
I was going to say a bit of depth there now with Jacob Blight as well, because apparently he's been performing quite well in pre-season. So the tall stocks are there, developing tall stocks. But compared to some other teams, we do have quite a few young developing talls, and we haven't even got to the forwards yet. We were the land of the smalls last year. Now we're all of a sudden the land of the giants.
Absolutely.
Tom Brown, they've got Ralphie, Taranto, Jack Ross, Mansell, who's apparently absolutely killing the preseason too. Well, I know we always say that, but all reports are he is flying. I've put Fawcett in over Kaczynski, and a lot of people have been talking to me about like Armstrong in particular, Fall, who we've picked up. And even Sims, but I think again it's the long-term strategy. It could be round 3, 4, 5 they'll be in, but I don't know if we'll necessarily start that. What's your kind of vibe there, Al?
Yeah, I mean, I think that centre half forward spot is a bit of a placeholder there, and it's one of those young talls will get in there. And it's just a matter of which one. Maybe Armstrong seems to be a bit further ahead in his development than the others, but we know with all those young key forwards they always take a bit of time. So. Fawcett's been on the list for a couple of years, even though we haven't really seen him. So maybe he gets in first. But be interesting to see which way they go. But they're probably they're going to be cheap in Supercoach, but I don't know that you'd be really looking for any of those tall guys anyway.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing about talking about those guys because, we've seen it with key talls. And not only do they struggle to score, especially in a team that's probably going to be poor like us going forward, but they're going to be in and out, and there's been going to be a bit of rotation. So I've put Fawcett in there for now just because he has been on the senior list for a couple extra years and probably can take the hits a little bit better than some of the younger bodies. Seth Campbell, Rioli Jr., Tommy Lynch, hopefully back fit and firing, has looked good in some of the photos I've seen of him. Stilly Green, and then Nanku was brilliant last year, skippering the team. Meatball, Hopper, and then the interchange bench, Banks, Dow, Smiley, and Laylaw. I've got the 2 new recruits, and I've put McCain McAuliffe there, but you could really raffle that sub position. That's the 23 as I probably see it at the moment, bar any injuries and court cases and everything else coming up into round 1. Is there anything you want to add before we get into these Supercoach players?
The one name that I'd probably maybe push to get in there somewhere who went down to Punt Road for one of their training sessions before Christmas. And the guy that really caught the eye was Jacob Bauer. Took 3 or 4 really good, strong contested marks. We know he's not huge. He's more of that sort of third tall size in the forward line, but he finished last year pretty well. He'll be vying for one of those spots, on a flank or in a forward pocket, I would say. But again, I mean, I was looking through some of the, I'm sure we'll get into this, the Supercoach numbers from last year, but Richmond just has a lot of players who don't score, a heap of points. Like, Bauer showed a bit at the end of the year, but you look up his Supercoach scores and they're like 50s. So, not someone you'd probably be looking for in fantasy, but he looks like he's got a bit of talent at least.
Yeah, exactly. I think for us, I know obviously we focus a lot on the Classic, but there is 2 games in Supercoach, which is the draft point of view. And some of these sort of, especially if you're in a kind of little deeper draft, some of these Richmond players are going to get a little bit more of an opportunity. So the likes of maybe a Mansell, Ralph Smith, And now that not only have lost Dusty, but Jack Graham in there. So some of these sort of lower names, even Sam Banks, for example, could be sort of those smokies that you pick up in your last couple rounds of your draft, and they're the ones that are the gold, because we all know what the great players do, and that's why everybody touches them. But to really perform well in your drafts, it's picking up these smoky players who not only then somehow play 20, 22 games, but sort of roll out 65, 70s and even more on any given week.
Yeah, and the other name I'd throw in there too is Jack Ross, who was a bit of a forgotten man last year. Only played 7 games. Obviously, Richmond had a heap of injuries, and he was one who copped it. But I think if he's fit, he's a regular. Could definitely get some centre square time. Like, he's not a primo in Supercoach Classic, but if you're looking for sort of 80s at a someone that probably no one else is picking on your bench, then he's someone you could think about it for sure.
For sure. All right, so we're here to talk Supercoach. Let's get through these targets. We'll start in the defence. I've put the 2 primos. Well, they're not as primo and uber as some of those other guys we're talking about, but the fact that the ball is going to spend a lot of time in that Richmond defence. So I've put Vlosten and Jaden Short there. There's a lot of talk still in the community about Jaden Short. Are we ever going to see probably the best of him from a Supercoach perspective? Myself included, started him last year. I know a lot of the other community did, and that didn't work out too well for us. But potentially this year, if he can sort of get back to that, not just the running carry, but he's kicking off half back, there's potential there for him to be a value defensive option. What are your thoughts about both Vlossi and Short there?
I mean, every year Vlossi teases us for 2 or 3 games. I think in the first few rounds last year, he had a 160 in there, but he's never been able to string together a whole season over his whole career. I don't think he's ever averaged 100 over a whole season. So I feel like he'll pepper some good scores, but probably not reliable enough to pick. But Shorty, excuse me. But Shorty's always interesting. He's averaged 98 3 times in his career. Last year, only 82. So we know he can do better than that. And obviously, Daniel Rioli going out creates a bit of a void. So a few more kick-ins maybe. Not that Rioli took heaps of those, but he was definitely the go-to man sort of rebounding out of defence. So if Short can pick up some of that ball, there's definitely a way I can see him getting back up easily into the 90s and potentially better than that. I was talking with MJ from the coaches panel actually in the last few days, and he threw up the idea that teams with a lot of young players often revert to a bit more of a possession sort of slow it down sort of style, which we saw North do, to take it to absolute extremes, throwing a Zeeble type back, and they just chip it around to try and protect some of those young guys a little bit. So I wouldn't expect us to go that far, but if Richmond does maybe employ a little bit of that, try and control things a little bit more, you could imagine, Shorty would be a key part of that with his kicking and, pick up a few more uncontested marks and things like that. There's ways I can see him, getting to more of a primo level. And at that price, there could definitely be some value there.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually talking to MJ as well, and sort of a bit of off air, and it's kind of similar conversation there. And as you said, Jaden Short, 3 years there of 98, another year there of 96. So he's definitely at value at that sort of 82 mark. So you're getting a guy who, potentially is 16 points cheaper than what his price is usually at. And as you said, if Richmond are going to play, maybe that little sort of chip game, he picks up those extra points. Rioli is a big loss. Like, you take that many points. And just the guy that they've been looking for to move the ball out of halfback. And that's why I originally included Vlosten in there as well, because, if it's not the kick-ins, they've got to kick into someone, and they're usually not kicking into the tall. So they're probably kicking into each other a lot of the time and trying to find each other. Or if they're trying to kick to, say, a Bolter or Miller, it's going to be the other one running past and trying to get the handball received. So, for the value, definitely I think Short needs to be considered a lot more than obviously Vlosten, who's teased us. But if the ball stays down there a lot, they're definitely both undervalued, especially Short.
Yeah, he's on the watch list for the moment, but it's hard when, like you said, last year in opening round, scored about 140 against Gold Coast, and then he just sort of imploded after that. So it's going to be very hard for a lot of people to go back there.
Yeah, there was some promising numbers late in the year. It was a 113, 105, 89, and 115. So I always like to kind of see that, how they kind of finish the year. And there were some, and maybe Richmond already kind of knew that Rioli's not going to be there let's start setting up. We saw sort of, Tom Brown taking a little bit more responsibility in those last days. So, yeah, as you said, it's a big preseason watch, and hopefully for people are burnt by him, and it might end up being a real pod for those who are willing to take a sort of that discount option.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
All right, we'll move on to the midfield. I've only put the one Primo in there. Again, he's a very frustrating guy. He probably didn't have the year that we were expecting. Much better the year before when he was a forward option for us. But I have included Tim Taranto because he has, had the 106. It was nearly 107 the year before. So he has gone up around that, close to that 110 mark, which I was talking on another pod about the fact that Tom Green was the 9th best and, around that 110, 111 anyway. So Taranto is by far the number one midfielder at Richmond, has the ability to do it. But, there was reasons why we didn't see it last year. At 509, I can see some people may be tempted, but at the same time, I can see a lot of people avoiding there. What are your thoughts about the primary number one Richmond midfielder?
I definitely think he'll outscore that price. Missed, I think, 8 games last year with injury. Had some good scores, some pretty low ones. Sort of hard to put a finger on exactly what happened, but obviously he didn't have a lot of sort of continuity, which we know he's a super hard worker. So I think the base is there with his contested possessions and his tackling, and we know his kicking isn't necessarily the most polished part of his game, but that's just Tim Taranto. But it's a matter of whether he gets up to, you're getting 50 grand worth of value or 100 grand worth of value. So I don't expect he'll be a hugely popular starting pick, but I can definitely see there being some upside there. So one to keep an eye on, maybe if he starts well. But we all owned him 2 years ago, and he was a great pick. So we probably shouldn't forget about him.
Yeah, for sure. And up to the bye that year, he was averaging 119. I think a lot of people forget how good he was in our side. So, and that was playing. Yeah, it's annoying because obviously at that point we had him as a forward, but if he was able to pull that sort of 14 game period and get anywhere close to that 119, you're talking about the top end premiums and at a very discount price. So it's another one there. I think nobody outside probably the diehard Richmond supporters might go near, but it could be that sneaky one that we might be talking after 6 or 8 rounds going, oh God, I wish I grabbed Taranto at 5'9". He's matching it with some of the better players.
Yeah, and he's like, the role is exactly what you want. There's no question about where he plays. He's, the number one centre bounce mid every single week. Plenty of opportunities to, get those clearances and tackles and all those things. So, we know he can do it.
Yeah, for sure. I'll bunch the rookies all together. We'll have a good discussion about that. But we'll get to the forward man. He's 31 years old now. Been awesome ever since he joined the Gold Coast. Maybe not the last couple of years, but we did get a couple of flags out of him, and that's Tommy Lynch coming in at 183,000 this year. Does the big man interest you for starters? Has he spent any time in your team, Al? And what else do you want to add about him?
Well, how long's the team picker been open? I think I put him in there when it opened, and he's still there. So he definitely interests me. And I suppose my theory is he's going to stay there until he breaks down, which could be any time between now and the start of the year, or hopefully, gets us through to halfway through the year, or, you never know your luck. But his body's clearly a massive issue. He played 4 games in each of the last 2 years. But when he's up and going, forget he was an absolute premium scorer back, a couple of years ago. Obviously, Richmond's team is a bit different. It's going to be pretty tough going down there in the Tiger forward line compared to what it was in those premiership years. But at that price, it's, he's cheaper than some of the rookies, cheaper than Sam Layla, for example. So I think he's worth a punt for sure if he's playing in round 1.
Yeah, 100%. And even in sort of 2022, we were kind of mid-table. I think we finished 7th, got knocked out by Brisbane, but it was definitely on the decline compared to the premiership years. So, but there's still obviously some good players around. But yeah, he had that 3-game period where he it was like a 160 odd, a 180. It just absolutely destroyed teams. Now, I don't expect him to go anywhere near that, but you only need the right week from Tom Lynch, who can definitely sort of kick 4 or 5. I think the big thing for me is it depends where he lines up. If he starting the goal square, it's probably somebody I'm not really looking at because it's going to be harder for obviously him to get the ball. But if he is that back to that centre half forward and got the ability to roam up the ground where they might be protecting one of the young kids, but he's using that body of his to get up, link up, and take marks as the focal point between that sort of 40 and 80 range, then I'm definitely interested because it's only going to take him kicking a couple of goals and a couple of contested marks. And as you said, he's cheaper than some of the rookies that we have. So and it only takes them one big game. Maybe he can get hold of maybe it's a Gold Coast or a North Melbourne and sort of rounds between sort of 6 and 10, and spikes 100, and you're on your way.
Yeah, and I mean, that role that you talked about is 100% what Richmond were crying out for last year. Obviously, they were struggling in a lot of areas, but the forward line was a complete shambles, really, and they had nobody in that spot to kick to down the line, or the Jaden Shorts coming out of defence, and which you'd have to dig really deep into the numbers to find out how much it affected his scoring when he's just kicking to nobody, as opposed to having someone like Tom Lynch to kick it to. So. That kind of makes sense that you could play a Harry Armstrong or a Liam Fawcett more out of the goal square as a younger forward, but it's really is Tom's body sort of still up to doing that. Again, at training he looked great. He's absolutely ripped, and he's moving great. In the start of Jan. So fingers crossed he makes it through to the start of the year.
He's like nearly a tall version of Cal Mills. Like I'm used to seeing him absolutely ripped and Heaney and that, and all of a sudden here's Big Tom absolutely looking shred and put a massive preseason in. So yeah, it has me a bit buoyant about potentially picking him. But as you said, 8 games in 2 years, there are massive question marks.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's probably the one or two. I've only got 1 or 2 Richmond guys in my team at the moment, and he's one of them. And the other one probably is Smiley, if we go to some of those rookies. If you look at the, Richmond had so many draft picks, but we talked about they picked 3 or 4 sort of tall forwards who'll probably take a little bit of time. Taj Houghton is coming off an ACL. We probably won't see him till halfway through the year. Sam Layler's, just working his way back for some hamstring and other issues. So there might not be that many of them that are ready to go, but I think Smiley is one who is coming in fit and firing sort of thing. And I think he'll definitely get opportunities. He's absolutely massive. Just the only thing that sort of just jumps straight out at you when you see him is, I think, 195 centimeters. So if he gets some time in the center square, just, that gives him an actual, a natural advantage to just that reach to get his hands on the ball. So, obviously all the junior numbers were very, very good. So Richmond supporters will be wanting to see some good things from, because as I said, some of these other draftees we might not see for a little while. So he's probably going to be carrying the flag with maybe Layla early on. But it's just, how many of those expensive rookies are we going to pick? Because so many of them look good with your Sid Draper and Jagger Smith and Levi Ashcroft and all these guys. So is there a spot there for Smiley? But he's definitely in the mix there for my team anyway.
Yeah, and he's the one that hasn't left my side as well. From a rookie, it's for us, first of all, as a Richmond supporter, I can't remember the last time we've had someone sort of that tall physique like sort of Cripps and Bont. It's actually got me really excited. He's the one on the leading into the draft. Between him and Jagger Smith, I was sort of wanted one or the other, but I really wanted to get Joshua in because, just to have that big body and the fact that he can come in straight away, his body compared to maybe some of these other draftees who might be a little bit more lighter frame, he should be able to stand up to the rigors of AFL a little bit easier, which does make me think, he's probably an easier pick than some of the others.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that video. He's probably not the biggest, strongest guy in the AFL, but where he shrugged off, this video going around of him before Christmas, shrugging off Hugo Ralphsmith in a tackle at training, and he was just, brushed him off like he was a fly, really. So, hopefully we see more of that.
Yeah, for sure. And
he might be lining up on Cripps in round 1, mightn't he?
Well, that's the thing. If he's playing, it might not be the first bounce, but he's going to go straight to that center square when he comes on. And I think Walsh will have him covered. So it's either going to be maybe standing next to Hewitt or Cripps, and they may even do that. They might say at some point, Cripps is one of the best, midfielders in the players in the competition. He's won Brownlows for a reason. Here's an opportunity to go play against one of the best midfielders and learn from him. So, that'll be very exciting, and it'll be interesting to see how he kind of stacks up size-wise up against Paddy Cripps.
Yeah, absolutely. He might look a little bit skinnier at this stage, but yeah, that's sort of the prototype that we're hoping for in a couple of years' time at least. Just looking up his under 18 numbers, average 129 Supercoach points in the Coates League, 25 disposals, 4 marks, 5 clearances, 3.5 tackles, 1.3 goals a game, and 96 ranking points at the national champs. So yeah, it was an interesting case that I think earlier in the year he was definitely in the conversation for pick one, and then a few others overtook him sort of towards the back end. So he, it was a little bit of a slider in some ways, but obviously Richmond were really keen on him from the start. So very exciting to see how he goes.
Yeah, and the other one, obviously, you mentioned is Sam Laylaw, who did go number one, are paying the premium price for him, which is the annoying part of it. But unlike some maybe number ones in previous years who are different positions, he is a midfielder. Just has had a few injury concerns, which it'll be how early the Tigers play. If he's ready to go round one, they'll have him in, but it might be a few weeks before that, which might not be the world's worst thing. Like, a part of me kind of wants him not to debut to sort of maybe round 4, round 5, so we can get a couple of games, look at him, and then potentially able to bring him in by, maybe it's a cash cow who was, around that, even the 99K now, the old 102, or maybe is fattened by 100K, and then they'll, turn him into like the number one pick. That might be a strategy that we might be able to get through, because he's obviously an explosive mid. They can probably start him at half forward. They may even look at him have an opportunity at half back, like we've seen a lot of these top picks come in. So the teams, they're a lot better at now bringing in these high draft picks and getting them to impact early.
Yeah. I think there's a few people who were hoping he'd be a DPP mid forward, which he must have just missed out on based on the numbers. But I think we can expect to see a bit of him in the forward line. And halfback would be great from a Supercoach point of view for sure. But you might be right. Maybe it's we just make a quick $100,000 out of Tom Lynch and then flick him over to Sam Laylock, sort of round 6 or 7.
Yeah, and that would be perfect. You're right about most of the other guys from the rookie point of view. How the fact that they are talls or Taj, there's a part of me that can't wait to see him, but there's another part of me that hopes that we kind of just let him have the year, and from a Supercoach perspective, and then we can still get him cheap the following year, because there's a lot of excitement about him as well. But the one that we did pick up, which is cheaper, who could potentially come in and play a role. It might not be from round 1, but definitely could be early. Is Jasper Elgar. He was the one that slid, so we ended up trading in later in the draft. So I think the Fox Footy or one of the pages had him like ranked inside the top 30 of draft picks, and I think he slid, maybe it was at 58 or something late that we picked him up for. So obviously it's always hard trying to get these players who are further down the ranks, but definitely there was a lot of talk about what he could provide in the forward line. And we know of injuries and sort of Richmond have been crying out since losing sort of Butler, Higgins, those sort of guys up the forward line, that they need another option up there. So there is potential for an Elgar to come in and play a role for the Tigers. Might not score the best, but still at his price might need to be looked at.
Yeah, so I think he was only 17 still when he was drafted, so he's quite young. But the highlights are exciting, and he is that sort of Jack Higgins type player who can take a mark and really nice goal sense. And as you say, maybe picked for a need that we need a player like that. So I can see him getting a chance at some stage during the year. So one to keep an eye on at 113K. The other one who did spot at training, who did a couple of really nice things, was Luke Traynor, who's a defender. He was picked 21, so he's only 113K as well. Just a name to keep an eye out for a defensive bench, maybe, if he gets a look in early. He's a pretty skinny, that kind of floating defender who can come in from the side and take a mark or impact the contest that way. So he's just another name to have on the radar. I know he's had a few concussion issues in his junior years, so hopefully, fingers crossed for him and for the Tigers and everything. We don't have to worry about that too much, but he's a cheap defender who might get a chance early as well.
Yeah, and the forgotten men on that as well who have been on the list for a couple of years. Juddy Clark, who's coming back from an injury. So again, we obviously are talking a lot about our round one sides and the lead up to that. But as the season goes on, some of these young fellas are going to get a chance for the VFL and depending on form, will get opportunities. So Juddy Clark at 119 and Caleb Smith at 121. Are just a couple of names to keep on your notepad there, guys, and monitor their form because they will get opportunities throughout the season.
Yeah, Caleb Smith is one who broke in for 4 games last year. He was the sub twice, put up some pretty good numbers in the VFL. And I've heard his name floated around on some of these Richmond forums as a possible, not necessarily a replacement, but somebody might get more opportunities in that sort of Dan Rioli kind of role. He's that style of player. So he's definitely one to just keep an eye out for. And the other one who's a little bit more expensive, you've got him as the sub, is Kane McAuliffe, who we saw glimpses of last year. Didn't he have about 80 at half time in one game and then completely blew up? And I don't know if he touched it after that, but he's definitely got the game to score some Supercoach points. Big bulky midfielder. And talk about players looking ripped. Richmond put a photo out of him and he's absolutely shredded. Spent a fair bit of time in the gym, so only averaged 45 in his 9 games last year, but was the sub a few times as well. Did have a 156-point game in the VFL. He's 244K. So if he's someone who gets more opportunities early, that price is a little bit higher than probably what you'd be looking to pay. But someone that at least has had a bit of exposure at the top level already, and at second AFL preseason, hopefully he can come in and play some more games.
And the thing with him, like we know, Prestia, his body just can't get through the rigors of the season. So it's just how many games can he hopefully play before the inevitable happens, and a little bit like Hopper as well. So the players like your Dows and your McAuliffes are going to get opportunities because they're not going to just want Smiley Layla in there by themselves. They want some guys who have been on the list for at least a couple of years. So if I would sit there and it's like McAuliffe, he's just one again to be watching. But the moment if a couple of injuries happen to that Richmond midfield, there's a massive opportunity for him to go in and lift his workload, and somebody that you can definitely look at as a potential trade-in target as the season goes on. And that's also Sam Banks is another one, unfortunately listed at a midfield, but just the reports that I've had, would not be surprised if he's one that picks up dual position status at some point throughout the season because has been training off that half back line. And again, so if they're looking at potentially, covering for injuries, or even like we have seen Jaden Short play further up the ground before, if Banks is in sort of that juicy half back role or taking Daniel Rioli's role, it might be somebody to kind of look at.
Yeah, he's one I think they definitely like. The coaches down there giving him plenty of chances, and he sort of features in a lot of the Richmond socials and things like that. So obviously a player that they've invested a bit in for the future. So I think he'll get plenty of opportunities as well.
One last one I'll touch on, and before we wrap it up, is and it needs to be talked about, is in the ruck now. Nankervis, absolutely revelation last year. Did not see that coming. Leading from example, and ended up finished like. I don't know how many actually jumped on him, but that was definitely a ride to, that kind of probably took you to some Supercoach success. Averaged 110 throughout the season, and probably more because there was just no support around him. So he kind of had to do it all. He put up there was a couple of games there where he's gone over 150, another couple in I think in the 140s. So just absolutely huge. Which then we know like the vice captain and captains that we play in Supercoach. So and by the sounds of a lot of the community, they're struggling to find that sort of R2 lock it in. Like I know TDK has been mentioned. Some are looking at the cheaper option in Flynn. There's talk about Marshall playing forward, even the likes of Max Gawn, who's struggling with a little bit of an injury now. So kind of who to pair with Tristan Cherry. And I wouldn't necessarily discount Nank completely if he looks like backing up that role from last year. It's he could be one of the premium rucks again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any value in his price given how well he went last year, but I expect him to be around that mark again. One thing is for sure, like you look at all those draftees that the recruiting Richmond did, they didn't bring any kind of backup in, and that was even after Sam Naismith retired. So he has to carry it all by himself. So hopefully he doesn't break down at some stage, or we might get Samson Ryan back in there. But that's about it for the rucks on the Richmond list. So, they're obviously backing in Nank to have another huge year. Just looking at some of those ruck matchups early on, I mean, Port Adelaide, there could be some points on offer there. We'll see what St Kilda does. I suppose it depends. Is Darcy injured again in round 5? But there's a couple of matchups early where he might go right. I mean, TDKs obviously we know can score Supercoach points, but not necessarily through hitouts and that kind of thing. So there's an opportunity for Nank to get off to a good start.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I thought, though I didn't have him listed on the sheet there, it's definitely just one to again monitor because, as you said, it depends on how who's up against in the ruck, and even St Kilda. Like there is talk that they might play a rookie ruck and have Marshall play a little bit more forward. If Nank is the workhorse, and he's probably going to have to do 90% of the ruck for the Tigers, so at least he's not sharing it on game day, and there's not like anybody who's knocking on the door to take his spot as the main leader down there. So I think it's just got to be on that back of the list, and it wouldn't surprise me if a few extra people went there this year if a couple of those other rucks that we've been relying on in previous years just look like they've got a bit of role change, or if they're not getting their body up.
Yeah, no, I think he could be a nice pod, and obviously captain of the team, so he's shouldering a fair bit of responsibility down there with where Richmond's at the moment. But he did an amazing job last year. So he was clearly Richmond's number one Supercoach scorer, and he probably will be again.
Yeah, excellent. And I'll finish off with expectations for the year. What is your realistic expectations there, Al, for the Tigers?
I mean, they're not high. I must admit, if we can match last year's 2 wins, I think we'd probably be going okay. I mean, obviously, losing all those players, we know the Shea Boldens and Rioli and Baker leaving, and then you've got, Dusty retiring. Obviously, he was not at his best last year, but Grimes retiring. So, I mean, it's just a huge amount of experience leaving. So, I think Richmond was the second youngest team in the AFL last year, and surely they'll be the youngest this year by probably a fair margin. And then we talk about some of those draftees and even players who were injured last year are not necessarily going to be ready for round 1 anyway. So, could be a bit of a tough year for Tiger fans. So hopefully we can see a bit out of some of these kids and get some decent Supercoach picks out of it. But, I'm expecting we'll finish it very low, have another very high draft pick, probably pick 1 again next year, and hopefully we get Norths. They're sort of pretty close to the bottom, so we get 2 picks in the top 4 or 5 again.
Yeah, I was cheering for 2 teams next year, Richmond and then by North Melbourne. So no disrespect, North fans, but you know how the system works. So, thank you so much, Al, for coming on. Where did the public find you out there, mate?
It's pretty easy. I'm just on all the official Supercoach accounts, really. So probably the one to shout out here, if people are watching on YouTube, Code Sports YouTube page is where all the Supercoach content is, and that's for AFL, NRL, and all that different sports. But plenty of AFL stuff being pumped out from the preseason already, and a lot more coming. Keep an eye out there. And then my own, pretty much just on XL_SuperFooty. But happy to. You'll see plenty of me on all the Supercoach accounts over the next few. Well, probably months, I'm sure.
Yeah, if you're a BBL subscriber, you've probably seen plenty of L in the off season of the footy. But you do a wonderful job, you and the team over there at the Herald, Sun and Code Sports. So I do appreciate getting on. For our fans, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with us via X, Supercoach Insider 100, Swizz 26. Get on the Code Sports, get on there, the Supercoach, and like and subscribe to them. It's going to be a fantastic season, and we will talk soon. Thanks, Al. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.